met her in the fall. He took her to a movie, and when they done it all, he took her to a movie.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Fabulous Picture Show. I'm Amanda Palmer. Now, during our first ever Doha Tribeca Film Festival, which was held here in Qatar, one of our highlights was undoubtedly a masterclass with acclaimed Palestinian filmmaker Elia Suleiman, whose latest film, The Time That Remains, is considered his most personal yet. Elia Suleiman, seen here with the balloon, makes films that occupy their own unique genre. He takes the key images of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and uses his dark, bleak humor to subvert our expectations.
יש פה איזה בלון שהעיפו, אנחנו רוצים להוריד אותו, זה אפשרי?
And give instead a psychological and existential commentary on being Palestinian, both in Israel and the occupied territories. His first feature, Chronicle of a Disappearance, established his trademark style. Despite hailing from this rich oral storytelling culture, Suleiman eschews traditional narrative and uses his own silent, Buster Keaton-like presence to tie together his sharply observed vignettes. But his style was easy to misunderstand, and this image sparked controversy across the Middle East.
There is an instant emotional reaction to seeing the Israeli flag. Nobody wanted to take notice of the parents sleeping and ignoring. I suffered a little bit. I was snubbed quite a bit and tabooed and not allowed in certain countries in the Arab world.
Despite that, his second film, Divine Intervention, used similar techniques to show how a psychological occupation affects the Palestinians who live in Nazareth in Israel, and compares it to the military occupation of Palestinians in Jerusalem, Gaza, and the West Bank. And in this film, the static voyeur camera style of his first feature often evolved into elaborate fantasy. His latest film, The Time That Remains, retains many of these techniques, but sketches something closer to a story.
אתה נדרש לחתום כאן על כתב הכניעה הרשמי האומר כי העיר נצרת נכנעת ללא תנאים מוקדמים לצבא ישראל.
It's the story of the Arabs of 1948, those who stayed mainly in Nazareth after Israel declared independence. Based on his father's diaries, it shows how his family went from military resistance through political resistance to quiet despair. His most accessible film so far, it's won wide acclaim and was nominated for the Cannes Golden Palm, but not without again sparking controversy.
This film, production-wise, has not a cent from Israel, but I think there is an inferiority feeling here. Every time something succeeds and it's an Arab person or an Arab film, the first people who attack it are the Arabs.
Being an Israeli-born Palestinian, it's no wonder Suleiman has developed an eye for the absurd.
רק שריפה, תבואי מתחת למיטת הילד. זה בורגול. מה זה בורגול?
بورغل بورغل للكبة بورغل للتبولة للمجدرة بورغل.
تبع איתי לתחנה.
That he lampoons both sides causes him trouble, but makes him one of the world's most challenging filmmakers.
جارتنا ليش بترمي زبالتك على ساحتنا؟ مش عيب؟
جارنا ما هي زبالتنا اللي عم برميها على ساحتكو، هي زبالتكو اللي عم ترموها على حكورتنا.
طيب وإذا برضو عيب.
And he might at last be having an impact.
I think a lot of situations where there's occupation, people have a hard time to admit that humor is also part of the everyday and that it is actually a form of resistance. But certainly now a lot of the young people back in Palestine, a lot of regions in Lebanon, they are trying to employ humor as part of their, milieu in the films.
It was a masterclass full of insight and humour, so get ready to get into the mind of Elia Suleiman. Comedy is a huge part of your life. When did you know that that was going to be a main vehicle for you and your statements in cinema?
Maybe a lot of people are like that, but I'm very particularly awkward. I don't know how to put the lights on in any hotel. I have to ask all the time. I don't know how to put a DVD to watch, and I have not been disciplined in any field. I have not gone to any kind of academia, so I knew how to count to 10, but not in a, the proper order. So awkwardness, or if you want the humor, entered in a kind of a constructive element into my cinema, actually. This Buster Keaton-ish element came also along the way. I did not really know of his existence until I shot my first film, which is called Chronicle of a Disappearance. And it was then that somebody on the crew was telling me Buster Keaton, and also another filmmaker, which I totally agree has a similar kind of sensibility. His name is Jacques Tati, who's an amazing master of cinema. Many times when I'm down and uninspired, I can just go and watch even a segment of his films.
As we know, he's not just a director, you're a writer as well. Tell us about the process of that. Is it a labor of love, or is it excruciating to write? Do you enjoy the writing process? Is it painful? Do tell.
Script, for me, is so exciting when I start to write it, because it is the moment of solitude that I have so much pleasure from, so, and I'm so excited of the potentiality of the image. So I can just fantasize and giggle, and I'm self-entertained, I'm self-sufficient for my humor, and so when it's a funny scene, I'm like laughing, at my own jokes. It's terrible, but it's happening.
Check the coffee.
When you finish the first draft and you realize after the excitement is that you need to do a second draft, and that there's a problem in the narrative, and that it doesn't work in this place, and so you get a little bit of a thinking.
Or maybe it's not that funny.
No, then no.
I'm just kidding. It's very funny.
I'm leaving.
In Divine Intervention, where they kill the snake, I was wondering what your interpretation of this for this cinematographic style of this. I would like to call it a surveillance kind of work that you do.
Every time you saw a camera, it is really the point of view of the filmmaker. It is many times a position where I happen to have been there. Simply is to tell a story, and to tell a story from not too far, not too close. It has no sensational element. In other words, I don't go so close so that you are going, oh my God, this is interesting. No, I stay in a place, in contemplation, with a certain serenity and time for you to meditate the image, to see the movement inside of it. It is a place also without authority. You have to understand this is not an easy place to look for. It's not neutral. It has a passion. There's a charge.
I just wanted to ask you, why don't you talk in your movies?
I think whatever we say in our life, whatever we say, the things being said are so minute compared to the things that are unsaid. I started to cut language. I started to try and struggle so hard to tell what it is I could tell in the image. Now, silence itself actually has a site that is so undefined in our life, in our spiritual life, and it has a very political also territory, you know. If you're silent so many times, it's so destabilizing to power structures. They would beat you in order to talk. Then silence also does not have a center. You know, silence is something that the spectator can participate in. You know, you can fill in the space if you want. I take pleasure from the spectator participating in the making of the film.
My question concerns your movie Divine Intervention. There's a scene that was repeated throughout the film is when you're sitting in a car with your lover, and there's this hand movement or touching. I never got what it means exactly.
It's very simple, really. It's a kind of a discrete love story going on. I developed this translation of a violence that emanated from love. In other words, they kept touching each other until they exploded things. So if you remember, after every time, there was a grenade being thrown on some house. And so the energy of their resistance, this, I would say, feminine violence that emanate from this couple vis-a-vis the occupation. So every time they touched, something happened.
In part 2, more of our masterclass with Elia Suleiman after the break.
He met her in the fall.
Welcome back to this special edition of the Fabulous Picture Show, our masterclass special with Palestinian filmmaker Elia Suleiman here in Doha.
So let's come to The Time That Remains. This was a very personal story for you, as all your films are, but particularly because this was about your father. This was written from diaries that he had written, that you asked him to write, didn't you? So when did that journey start?
Basically, he used to sit many times and tell me stories of being young, being in the resistance. And they were always fascinating stories, a kind of Humphrey Bogart type of narratives, really. And then he got sick. I actually wanted him to forget his sickness for a while, so I asked him to now put down in writing, and just so that he is a little bit, you know, occupied.
ספורד 10, ותחליט בדרך אם אתה מוכן להגיד לנו איפה החבאת את הנשק. כשאתה מגיע ל10, אני מפוצץ את הראש שלך. ספור. 1, 2, 3.
Aren't there any restrictions which are imposed on you by the Israeli authorities?
Don't forget, I shot a lot of these films in Nazareth. It's kind of difficult, you know, to have imposition, you know, in this very charged, angry, despaired ghetto, you know. The army can only come in to shoot and beat when there is intifada time, you know. For example, in Divine Interventions, it was rather difficult to explode a tank, an Israeli tank in Israel. We did ask.
I can't believe you asked.
And yes, and they did answer. And they used their sense of humor as well. They said, yes, if you bring it in exactly the same shape as we give it to you. So that was not possible. So it was the humor of the French army. So we shot that scene actually in a military camp. They had the humor to give a tank, a real tank, in fact. We had a very major specialist in explosions from the French army, but what I wanted was so precise that he went nuts in his calculations. So we managed to explode that tank plus a huge fire in a forest that had to bring the fire, but it was awful. And something like 3 destroyed cameras because we never knew how we should explode a tank. The tank in the time that remains, also another problem. We did ask again. And the answer was, again, very humorous from the Israeli army. They said, you know, we would give it to you for sure if you give us a thank you credit. They knew the answer. So we had to use a 3D. This is a 3D shot. You couldn't get a tank in Ramallah, you know, an Israeli tank in Ramallah. There were times, yes, when I was prevented from shooting. Like when I was shooting in Ramallah, actually, the army started to invade Ramallah. They wanted to confiscate the decor. They wanted to confiscate the guns as well, which were real, now I can say. And they phoned the authority and they said, you give us everything on that, you know, set, or our convoy is entering Ramallah. Hamas also came out on, I think, their television and they said that we were protecting the Israeli soldiers. In fact, they were actors, and most of them Arab. But there was a lot of rumors started to go around, and then the Israelis came, and it was a bit of a mess to shoot that scene where the confrontation happens.
Could you explain us about the way with the actors to help them to act, to express their deepest emotions?
Normally, most of my actors are non-actors. It's my mother and my father and my friends and the people in Nazareth who I sometimes just see them passing and I feel something is interesting about their face. I go and catch them, and I have a casting department that's hunting people, you know. By the way, Nazareth is very peculiar. They love to act, and they're so good at it. There's so much talent there that I think it's also a lot of frustrations and a lot of anger and a lot of inner desire to express and to become other, you know. I worked with certain amount of actors. Some of them I did not enjoy very much because they come from a very, very severely overacting theatrical experience that I cannot stand. Sometimes when they start to use their expressions on their faces, I'm like, no, please, you know, just, you know, then Palestine, the cliche, you know, starts. Is we are victims or we are victors or we are, you know, we always have to put some kind of an angry expression to say, you know, how our land was lost, which doesn't work for me. As you saw, I don't use it. You know, a lot of the characters are movements within the frame. And I prefer the choreography. I prefer the musicality that comes from their appearances, etc.
Let's talk about also, if we could talk about the lead actor, Salah Bakri.
I have to tell you, it was a pure pleasure. I saw a couple of films, for example, where Salih acted. I was not terribly excited, but then the way our communication ensued was, I think, so amazingly pleasurable. Aside from me telling him all about my father, he took off one day into town and asked so many people who knew him of different stories that I did not know. He came back, he told me, okay, now I understand.
جارنا الحق
عاود درع حاله كان
انت عارف اني وقت ما اشتغل بمحطات البنزين كل ما يسكر بتطق معه وبدير على حاله الكاس.
And from then on, many times, I don't have to even explain to him. When he'd ask me, what do you think? I would tell him, do what you want. And he said, I understand what you want. It's not like do what you want to be free. He just felt that I needed something else, and he knew precisely where. He's an amazing actor. This is where you start to see how actors can be great. And I had a few like that in my film. I mean, The Neighbor. This is where some people might think this is a real person.
تركوني اموت وارتاح. انا ما ضلليش شيء. جارنا تخربش احسن لك.
And I was totally in disbelief that I could actually accomplish this with an actor. I was so scared. I thought it's best if I get a character and just feed him the lines.
شو هالعيش اللي عايشه الواحد.
But instead, I have this actor who did an amazing job.
عيشه كلتها واحد.
So I have a few actors who I absolutely enjoyed so much, and I tell you, it's would be a lie to say that I directed them, so to speak. A lot of things happen from the encounter itself. It's like love.
لو انه العرب شريبة كاس مثلي كان ربحنا الحرب من زمان. اسألني ليش؟ لأنه الواحد بقعد يمزمز على كاسين عرب بتزهزه معها بصير يشوف الطيارة بعيدة عنه مترين بإيده بتناولها وبتضلها كاتي. شو رأيك جارنا؟
والله ما فكرتش فيها.
You've given us some amazing words. Give us some parting words, because I know we've got lots of aspirant filmmakers here. Give us some words of wisdom so they can go away.
If I knew that there are so many filmmakers, I wouldn't have come. and I gave you all these tips. You should have told me that in the beginning.
I should have told you.
There's a price to everything.
All right.
First of all, you're not going to make any films. I don't want you to make any. Whatever happens, the experience cannot be just told in 2 sentences. If I can tell you anybody can do it, it is not terribly accurate. If I tell you nobody can do it except the magicians, it is terribly false. I can tell you it's difficult, and that the difficulty will become so unbearable sometimes that you think you are not capable, when in fact the day after you restart again, and if you see yourself inspired again, you just have to continue. In other words, there is so much pleasure to this field that definitely eventually worth every second of a moment of torment. So good luck.
Thank you so much. Well, that's it for this special edition of the Fabulous Picture Show, a masterclass with the brilliant Elia Suleiman at our first ever Doha Tribeca Film Festival. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you next time.